everybody, and welcome to Empowering Moments with Whitney. I know it's been so long. I know it's been a while since I have came to you all and just was able to send out a word. I've been so busy. I've been doing so much. If you've been following my Instagram page, you see all the things that I've been involved in. Well, some of the things I've been involved in when it comes to the Daughters of Zion ministry that I have. And just some of the other things, I'm just really excited for what God is shifting and what God is doing and what He's transitioning me to. But today God gave me a word, and I was gonna put it on the podcast. God said, no, I want you to put this on Instagram. I want you to relay this word on Instagram. And God gave me this word, and the word that He gave me was, I know a lot of you all here delayed and not denied. But hold on one second. Before we get there, I know y'all see my scenery is different. Okay, we are in my business office today. I've been so busy. Listen, y'all, when I say I've been grinding and getting to it and making stuff shake, we've been moving and shaking. Listen. I didn't even have time. I was like, listen, I got to get in. I got stuff to do. But anyways, so God gave me the word. And He was, I know a lot of times we hear delayed but not denied. But God gave me something different. God said, you're not delayed, you're promised. God said, you're not delayed, you're promised. And listen, I was like, okay, God, what you mean I'm not delayed, promised? And so God gave me a real life example, and I can throw myself under the bus. So as you all know, I had the Daughters of Zion podcast, and I now have the Daughters of Zion app. So I created this app. It was kind of, tedious, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I already knew what I wanted to do because this was a vision that God had already given me. I just didn't know how to bring it to my reality. So God gave that to me. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to use the tools. You have to do coding and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't know any of this. So nevertheless, got it, created it. And so now it came down to the point where now, okay, I had to get this thing approved with Apple. Oh my gosh. Getting an app approved with Apple seems like the hardest thing when you're doing it yourself. So I'm having to get greater memory on my MacBook. And then I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is just blowing my mind. I said, this ain't working, that ain't working. And then finally, when I got it transferred to Apple, then they're like, oh, rejected. Oh, what, rejected? And it was like, this ain't right, that ain't right, this ain't right. And it was just simple things that I just did not know. And it was my fault because I did not take the time to read their guidelines. So what I did was, I sat down and I read their guidelines. Okay, let me see what your guidelines are. I'm reading guidelines. I'm reading policies and procedures. Now, I'm in law school, so that is my forte. So now that I'm reading policies and procedures, now I can go back to my app and make sure my app is in compliance to what they require and is in their guideline. So I was able to go back and do that, approved and all that stuff like that. And, so the past couple of weeks I was going through that. So I was so happy to announce to everyone last week, hey, it's approved. We're going through it. But prior to that, that was the process that I was going through. That was the work I was going through. And I had to really shut down and really get focused. So God was telling me, He said, you looked at it as if you were being delayed. You looked at it as if the enemy was attacking. Granted, he was attacking. But when you shifted your mind and you turned your mind to look and say, you know what? I'm going to do what I have to do to get this. The enemy's not going to win. I shifted my mind. I said, you know what? I'm going to get down and I'm going to read these policies and procedures. And I'm going to make sure my app fits their standard. God was telling me I wasn't delayed. I was promised. See, when you're promised, it's perfect. A promise is always perfect from God. God never gives you a promise if it's not perfect. So, beyond even saying that, I'm going to say it this way. You're not delayed, you're perfected. I'm going to say that. You're not delayed, you're perfected. That's a better way to put this word. Delayed, not delayed, but perfected. So I'm thinking I was being delayed, by my app being rejected a few times. And then I realized, no, I wasn't I wasn't delayed. I was being perfected. God gave me a promise, but then I had to get my mind right. I had to understand that it was a standard that God held. It was a standard that Apple held in order for me to get to that promise. We don't realize that God gives us a promise, but there's a standard that God holds in order for us to get that promise. And listen, and it's not about being perfect. It's about being perfected. It's not about being perfect. It's about being perfected. So I'm going to jump into this right here, y'all. Listen, I know you know about how God promised Abraham and Sarah. And you're looking at it, this promise was Isaac. Now, God did this. He gave Abraham the promise in Genesis 12:4. That's when he promised to say, I'm going to do this for you. Fast forward to what? I'm looking at it. Genesis 20. Genesis 17. It still ain't happened. I'm going to read you Genesis 17, verse 20, while I'm up here on my iMac real quick. I want you all to hear this. It says, as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful, and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. Verse 21. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. God, y'all better catch that. So if you read a little bit ahead in verse 20, ahead of verse 20, Abraham was saying, God, please bless my son Ishmael. Now listen at this. Come on now. God gave the promise to Abraham in Genesis 12:4. Now you jump to Genesis 17, the promise still has not been fulfilled. So what Abraham did in between 12 and 17, he went out and said, you know what, God? I believed your promise, but you ain't done it yet. Why you ain't fulfilled it yet? Why you ain't held up your end of the bargain? I'm gonna go make this happen myself. I ain't got time to wait on you. So what did he do? He went and got Hagar, their servant, and he had a baby with Hagar, and they created Ishmael. So he felt like that was his promise. So when he realized, okay, I maybe have not did this the right way, but you know what? I wanted a son. God promised me a son, and I'm going to get what he promised me. Sometimes we can be the same way. We're determined to get what God promised us, and sometimes we step out a little too soon, or we step out of it, and we don't let God perfect that. But anyhow, so that's something else for another day. But so Abraham is telling God, I need you to make sure that you bless Ishmael. And God said, you know what? Okay, yeah, I'm a blessing. The blessing is on him. But listen, my promise is on Isaac. My promise is on Isaac. See, anytime you go into covenant with someone, you go into agreement. That means you're going into promise with someone. So when God promises you something, that is him making a covenant to you. Like me getting married, that is my covenant. That is the promise. We made a promise that we will love, honor, and obey one another. So that was the promise. And listen, God told him, he said, I'm going to bless Ishmael. I'm going to make sure he does well. Because you know what, guys? But he said, I'm going to bless you because he's from the fruit of your loins. I'm going to bless him because he's from you, because I'm going to bless you. But listen, the promise, the covenant is going to be with Isaac. I'm coming into agreement with Isaac. I'm going to bless Ishmael, but I'm going to come into covenant and agreement with Isaac. Come on, somebody. When you are coming, do you all understand that when you are saying, I'm promising, I'm coming into covenant, that's a perfecting. That's something that's going into perfection. And so that's what God was telling him. See, I'm going to bless him. That's going to be good. That's all good. But my covenant, my promise is on Isaac. That is my perfectness. See, when God gives you a promise, he makes that promise perfect. Listen at this. What God did with Ishmael, he said, you know what, Abraham, you went out and you made a little mess. You went out and you did your own stuff. See, God can turn around and bless what you've done if you give it to him. And that's what Abraham was doing. He was giving Ishmael to God, and he would say, please, bless him. See, God can bless your own mess. So you can go out there and get some stuff yourself, do some stuff yourself, and God can put his hand and blessing on it. But don't mean that his promise is on it. His promise. See, anything that is a promise of God is perfect. Anything that is a promise from God is perfect. Anything that is a promise from God is perfect. And guess what? That promise takes time, because in time it has to be perfected. And we know that perfection don't happen overnight. Even though God's infinite time is always different than our own, it can happen in a split second if God wants to. But the reality is, for us, it takes time to perfect something. It just don't happen overnight. It just don't, me sending the app to them, or me doing this, doing that. God needed me to, wait a minute, hold your horses, back up. I need you to take some time and learn what it is that you need to do. Understand and learn their standard. That requires time. So a lot of time we think that because we're delayed for something, we're denied. And like they said, you're not denied. You're delayed, not denied. Listen, you ain't even delayed. You're being perfected. Your gift is being perfected. The promise of God is being perfected. You don't want to walk into a promise of God, just like God didn't want me putting out an app that stands for his name, that represents who he is. That is not God. He has a standard. And what you have to understand, if God promises you something, it comes with a standard. And that standard is going to require perfection. And what requires perfection is going to take some time. So you may looking at it as being delayed. Stop looking at it as being delayed and understand it's being perfected for the promise. Oh my God. You're not delayed in that. Listen, you're being perfected for the promise. Oh my God, this is good. So now listen at this. So Abraham is saying, God, bless Ishmael. God said, I'm going to bless him. But the promise, my covenant, my perfection is on Isaac. And it took 25 years for Sarah to have Isaac. It took 25 years. But look what has been birthed. Look what has been birthed from the promise that God gave Abraham that took 25 years. Look at it. I am a product. I am what you see today. Abraham has a nation, and a nation that has gone on millions of years. Come on now, somebody. Can you understand this? This is the perfection. So God gave the covenant, the promise to Isaac. And from Isaac, we have been birthed. We have came from that. So look at that. Look at the promise that he gave Abraham. He said, nations will come from you. My promise. He told him, he said, 12 gonna come from Ishmael, but nations will come from Isaac. That's what he was saying. And that takes perfection. That takes time. So it maybe took 25 years. Sarah was never delayed. Her promise was just being perfected. See, listen at this. God works in reverse. We always know that. He don't work from beginning to end. He works from end to beginning. That's just God. I've always known that. When God gave me this revelation of this about 7 years ago, it blew my mind. And it always allowed me to think differently about life. So when you can look at it and you can say, okay, if God is working that backwards, oh my God, he's perfecting that. So if it's taking this amount of time, it's only being perfected. It's going to come. It's going to come. You're not delayed. It's only being perfected. That's it. That's it. If you don't understand that one, I also had written down with Hannah. Hannah was a good one. Hannah was barren. She couldn't have any children. And Hannah was married to Elkanah, and he had two wives. He had her and Peninnah. So he had those two as his wives. And we know Peninnah always mocked and picked on Hannah because, she was like, I have his children. You can't have none. But listen at this. Oh my God. I'm going to read this to y'all. And this is 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 5. But to Hannah, I'm gonna read this to y'all. I'm gonna start from verse 4. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Listen at this. If you read it in the Message version, in the Message Bible, it'll read to you and it'll show you. It says that he favored her. She had favor with Elkanah. He preferred. That's the term that the Message Bible used. He preferred Hannah over Peninnah. Listen at this, y'all. This is good. I love this. So she went into the temple, and she was crying. She was upset. She was like, God, you see what I've been going through. This woman has been torturing me. I want a child. I can't give my husband a child. And, Elkanah's like, am I not enough? I should be enough for you. Am I not enough? And, she would try to wipe her face and try to get herself together and say, I'm going to try this again. But she still was being tormented by that spirit in Peninnah. And so now listen at this now, y'all. So finally, Eli sees her. He thinks she's drunk, and so he's like, "What in the world going on with you, girl?" And she was like, "No, don't believe that. I'm not drunk. I ain't drunk no wine. Ain't nothing. I'm just bare. I'm just crying to God. I'm pouring out to Him, pouring my heart out to Him. He needs to know what I'm going through." And He said, "Go." He said, "Go be blessed. Go receive what God has blessed you with." She went home. Her and Elkanah, did what they did, and she got pregnant. Within a year, she produced the promise. She produced the promise. She produced the promise. Listen, it took Hannah a while to produce the promise. But listen, she was favored. She was favored. She was blessed. The promise was on her and she was favored. Listen at this. I want to say this. The promise is always favored. The promise is always favored. And the favor of God ain't fair, but it's faithful. I want y'all to catch that. The favor of God ain't fair, but it's faithful, baby. The favor of God is not fair, but it is faithful. And if you look at Abraham and if you look at Hannah, you can see how God has favored them. You can see how God has favored their loins and what they were coming out to produce. Look at the promise that God gave them. God gave them a promise, and even with Hannah, it looked like it was denied. It looked like it was delayed. Why is this taking so long? I should have had a baby by now. This woman over here, she got several of his children, and I can't even get one of his kids. Why is it not coming? You know why? Because the promise was coming through her. The promise was not coming through Hagar. The promise was coming through Hannah. Listen at this. Lord Jesus, I done got them mixed up. I mean, the promise was coming through not from Peninnah, but it was coming through Hannah. So Hannah was producing the promise, not Peninnah. So look at what Hannah produced. She produced the promise. Now, granted, the promise went off. Now, we know, we read about Samuel, he went left. But nevertheless, the promise still came from her. The promise came from her. She was already favored. It already says in Genesis and in 1 Samuel, first chapter, verse 5, it already tells you right there. Hey, she was favored. Elkanah, he favored her. She already had favor on her life. So even though it may look like she was delayed with having her baby, with the birthing, God was perfecting that. That's all it was. It was a perfection. He was perfecting her. He was building her. He was fine-tuning her. He was getting her ready and prepared for the promise that he already promised her. Look at Abraham. Look at Sarah. They was 100 years old before they had Isaac. But guess what? As it was the promise. As it was the promise, y'all. Understand this. God wants you to be able to look at your delays differently. You're not delayed. It's just perfection for the promise. You're being perfected for the promise. Listen at this. You're being perfected for the promise. You are not delayed. You are being perfected for the promise. So when you are in that season that feels like you are being delayed, I need you to tell God, help me to understand what I need to do for you to continue to perfect me. Perfect me. What I need, what is it that you need me to do? Because see, you got a promise for me and I'm going to reach that promise. But I also know you're doing a perfected work within me. So in order for me to get to the promise, I need you to perfect what's in me so I can get there. God ain't going to send you to the promise unprepared. God ain't going to send you to the promise when you ain't got what you need. God is not going to send you to a promise when you ain't ready to be there, because he knows you will only destroy the promise and you will break the covenant off your life. See, that's what God wants you to do. See, when you have a promise on your life, it's a covenant. It's an agreement. God ain't sending you to go to your promise and your covenant unprepared so that covenant and promise will break and say that he's a man of God, that he shall lie, because he's a man of God. He cannot lie. So he ain't going to send you to the promise unprepared. Start praying for God to prepare you and perfect you for the promise. Stop looking at it as a delay. See, I could have looked at my app and me getting rejected a few weeks ago for my app. I could have looked at that and continued to say, oh, I'm being delayed. But I had to understand God has a standard for the promise that he was sending me to. Apple had a standard for what their app store holds and the apps that they allow in, because they have a standard. They said, anything less than this can't come in agreement with us. We can't come in covenant with that. We can't come in promise with that. And see, God had to go back and show me how to perfect that which was in me so that I could get to the promise. Come on, somebody. Stop looking at it and thinking that you are delayed. You are not delayed. You are being perfected for the promise. But if you look at it and you continue to believe that you are being delayed or that you're being denied, then baby, you will never get to your promise. A lot of people have not reached their promise because they're too busy looking at their promise wrong. They're too busy looking at their process in the wrong way. Stop looking at your process as being delayed or being denied. You're not delayed or denied. You are being perfected. So instead of looking at it this way, begin to pray and say, Lord, help me to know how to get prepared for where you're taking me and where you're showing me where to go, because you promised me something. Help me to get there. See, that's what happened to Abraham. He knew and believed in the promise, but see, God was taking too long. So instead of him saying, God, perfect that which is in me to help me get prepared for the promise that you're bringing me, because listen, if you're bringing me nations of people, if you're saying nations will come from my loins, you need to perfect in me. You need to get me right. You need to build patience in me. You need to help me to understand how to be patient, that I can have nations come through me so that I can give them wisdom. Because if nations come from you, baby, you got to be a wise daggone person. Because you cannot lead nations to God with no wisdom. You cannot lead nations to God with no wisdom. So what Abraham did, Abraham said, you know what, God, you're taking too long, but I still believe in your promise, but you're taking too long. And he went and stepped out and had Ishmael. And God said, you know what, since I already love you, I'm still going to bless Ishmael. But the promise, the covenant is going to be on Isaac. My covenant and my agreement is on Isaac. And still, even though you stepped out and you did what you did and you didn't go about it my way, I'm still going to bless it. I'm still going to bless it anyhow. See, he still got, so listen at this, Abraham got double the blessing. He got a promise and he got a blessing. He got double for his trouble. That's what you could say. That's what they say. That's what they say sometimes. Double for your trouble. That's what he got. And that's what you have to look at. So God will bless you in your mess. He'll bless your mess when you bring it to him. He'll bless your mess when you bring it to him. When you say, Lord, hey, I done messed up. I know I did. I know it. Just like Abraham, look, I know you promised me and I tried to do it myself. I messed up, but can you please bless it? I'm giving it to you. Can you bless it? See, when you bring your trouble, when you bring it to God, God can turn around. He can take that trouble and he can still bless it. Yeah, you sinned. Yeah, you did wrong, but you turned around and came to God and said, God, I need you. I'm wrong. I know I was wrong. Forgive me, but can you still use me? And God said, baby, I can still use you. I can still bless you. See, now I'm going to tell y'all some stuff. See, I've been humiliated on social media in the past the whole lot. I have been torn down in the past the whole lot. Names scandalized in the streets. When I tell you they threw dirt, mud, and everything, if they could have buried me, they would. If they could see me 6 feet deep in a grave, they would see me 6 feet deep in a grave. But baby, let me tell you one thing about God. Even in my mess, even when I was wrong, even when I wasn't doing right, when I came back to God, when I came back to Jesus, and I said, Jesus, forgive me. When I told him I did wrong, when I came back to him, he said, baby, I'm going to bless you anyhow. I'm going to bless you anyhow. The blessing going to be on you. And guess what I'm still going to do? I'm not only going to bless your mess, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to still give you the promise that I promised you at first. God, come on, somebody. He said, I'm still going to bless your mess because you came back to me, and I'm still going to give you your promise. Look at the prodigal. I want to say, is it the prodigal's child? I don't know. I can't even think of the name. But it was the son that went away from home. He ran away. He was eating slop. He was eating pig slop. He said, this is even beneath me. He found himself eating slop. Don't spend all his money. His daddy gave him his portion. He spent it all. And he went back to his daddy. And he said, Daddy, I done messed up. See, remember, God gave him the blessing. He gave him the blessing. The daddy gave him the money. He went out spending on women. Got so daggone broke, he found himself eating pig slop. He said, what in the world I'm eating out here with the pigs? I done got so low. And then he went back to his daddy. And his daddy welcomed him with open arms. And he said, baby, guess what? I'm still going to give you your promise. I gave you your blessing. You messed that up. But guess what? I'm still going to give you your promise. A lot of y'all don't understand. You're not being delayed. You're not being denied. You're being perfected for your promise. Stop looking at your waiting season and stop looking at your process as if you're being delayed or if you're being denied, and start looking at it differently and saying, God, I need you to perfect in me. I know you sent me back for a reason. If you sent it back to me, if you rejected me with this, he didn't reject you. If it rejected, just like Apple rejected my app that time, what is it that I need to do? I gotta fix something. Now listen at this. Don't get this twisted, because somebody about to get this twisted. If that man don't want you, do not go back trying to fix yourself and get yourself what he gonna want you. Don't do that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the promise. If that man rejected you, he ain't your promise. I just want to say that because that jumped in my spirit, because somebody about to take that left. Anyhow, so listen. Stop looking at your process as if you've been delayed or denied. You're being perfected for your promise. You're being perfected for your promise. God is not going to give you a promise and have you ill-prepared or unprepared to walk into your promise. He's not going to do that, because what's going to happen if he sends you, if he allows you to walk into your promise unprepared, he knows you will break that covenant, and then it will make him a man that he shall not lie, because he already promised it. But he can't allow you to keep the promise if you ain't prepared for it, because you will mess the promise up. You'll destroy the promise, and guess what? The promise will turn into a curse, because then if you're not prepared, the promise will be a curse to you. It's a lot of people out here that's walking in curses because they walked into a promise, oh come on, that they were unprepared for. Listen at this. Let God perfect in you. Let God perfect you for the promise. You're not delayed. You're being perfected for the promise. Y'all have a good day. I got to go. I got to get to my children. I've done my work here at the office. Once again, this was Empowering Moments with Whitney. Share this. Send it out to other people. Let them see it. Be encouraged today and empower someone else. Have a blessed rest of your day.